I think I'm live here. Anybody who wishes to come for a smudge to open the session, please come down to the front and Karen will take care of you.
I can see that 2 people have just joined by phone. Can you please tell me your names?
Andros Lukowski with Global Edmonton.
Thank you. And there's one more person who's joined recently by phone. If you could, you're unmuted. If you could just identify yourself, please.
Hi, this is Anila Hussein Ali.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Commissioner Hussein.
Okay.
Hi, this is Commissioner Anila Hussein Ali.
Okay, thank you. Hello, I can see that someone has just, an additional person has just joined by phone. If you could please identify yourself.
Hi, it's Andrea Hunkar with CBC News.
Thank you.
And Lori Hahn had joined by phone before, but I can see my WebEx seems to be working, so I'm going to hang this up.
Can I check if I've lost you? Test, test, test. Anybody there?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, we will get going, but before we start, just some comments about being in here. Social distancing is still, of course, in effect, and for anybody, it's almost like being called to the bar, right? There's the bar, and so anybody behind the bar can't come in front of the bar. I'm told that's the way that the rules in here work, and we do have to maintain social distancing. I guess there would be some housekeeping things, but we can figure them out at the break, because I'm going to point you to the wrong direction. For everybody else who's phoning in, as you can see, this is not our regular room, this is not our regular process, so please bear with us if we run into any technical difficulties. We've got some wonderful City of Edmonton staff members here keeping things up, running and going. But as I say, we're not used to this, so please forgive any hiccups. So I will call the meeting to order. It is 12:05. And start with the protocol items. We begin by acknowledging the traditional land on which we are gathered here today as Treaty 6 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis people. We would like to acknowledge and thank the diverse Indigenous people whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, such as Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Nakota Sioux, as well as Métis and Inuit. It is a welcoming place for all people who come from around the world to share Edmonton as a home. Together, we call upon all of our collective honored traditions and spirits to work in building a great city for today and future generations. Now, this month, being National Indigenous History Month, we are going to have Commissioner Mackenzie provide us with some words and some teaching. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Ruth, and Tansi and Oki, to my Blackfoot brother who has joined us. And thank you for that land acknowledgement. This is my last year as a commissioner, and when I started in 2015, it was also the year that the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation report were issued. And at my first meeting in June, I asked if we could acknowledge the land and acknowledge the day that it was, because it actually was Indigenous Aboriginal Peoples Day. And I was told, no, it's not in the Police Act, and we can't do that. And there was a couple of commissioners who decided to say, well, we'll just see about that. And so by the end of 2015, we had voted on it, and it was now part of our regular practice. And part of the research they did also indicated that we were the first police commission to be doing a land acknowledgement. So congratulations to you all. So one of the things I want to talk about through my teachings and through that land acknowledgement is two themes. One is the story of change, and the other is the story of relationships, and they're so related. And this place we call home, why we do this land acknowledgement, teaches us that change is part of life, that we are tuned to the seasons. So spring is about new beginnings, summer is about nurturing that growth, fall is when we harvest, and winter is when we rest and reflect and think about where we're going to go. And it's also a time to learn and share stories. And certainly, spring as a new beginning, we were also hit with COVID-19. And, boy, oh boy, that's a pretty big new beginning. And it really taught us how agile we are and how we can pivot when we need to. And certainly we've seen that in post-secondary, or actually all our education systems. They all said, we need to do more online teaching. And within 2 weeks, they were all doing online teaching. And they could have waited and thought about it and planned it and researched it more and more, but they could actually do what's called in business a lean startup. Just do it, and we'll start to figure it out and collect data as we go along. So part of that is, as I said, Amiskwichi Waskahagan, the place that this is known as for the last 12,000 years, is a place of welcome. And last year we also welcomed a new chief of police. So Chief McPhee, a proud Métis, was guided here by two First Nation chiefs from Saskatchewan, and they handed him over to us, where he was welcomed. And he was the first chief in the history of Edmonton to take the oath of office with an eagle feather. Again, another first for Edmonton Police Service. And as part of this welcome, he was gifted with a pair of moccasins that were made. We had to contact his wife and do the old cereal box, get his footprint, and we got moccasins made. But those moccasins were filled with handwritten messages from Indigenous youth from Ben Calfrobe School, welcoming him to this territory and a new way of being. And you know, this is who we do our work for, whether we're on the commission or in the service or when we're at home with our families. We do this for our children and future generations. And that brings us to the theme of relationships. And certainly when you are in a gathering of Indigenous people, we use the term all my relations, and we're all related. And we're not only related as people, but we're also related to the land, to the water, to the air, to the animals, to all the plants that grow there as well. So we're all connected, so we can't divorce one from the other. And as Indigenous people, we take our role as stewards of the land very seriously and speak for the land, and speak for our medicines, and speak for the animals, and speak for those who cannot speak. So we'll do a little exercise for you, and for those who are looking online, and I'll describe it, I want you to hold your hands like so. That looks like a triangle. And this is our current model, where we're talking about a hierarchy. So we have a few at the top, and we have many at the bottom. And the few at the top are the ones who are entrusted to help guide all of us somewhere along the bottom. And our Indigenous model is you take your hands and you move them forward, and you start to move your fingers into a circle. And that's why our circle teachings are so important. And that circle is about diversity and inclusion. It says everyone is welcome in the circle, and that circle can expand and contract as it needs to be, but it means that everyone has a voice or an opportunity. They may not stay in the circle, but they have an opportunity to speak. And so in our role as representatives of the community on the commission or in the leadership of the service and other people, it's our role to figure out what the genius is in every individual that's out there. Even if sometimes we don't like what they're saying, we still listen. And so I'll leave you with that, and to say, all my relations. Kitataman, I'm grateful. Hi, hi, thank you. Oh, one more thing. I do have, in that spirit of welcoming, we are always gifting. And so I'm going to gift the chief with a piece of sweetgrass from this land. And I've been desperate for a hug over this past quarantine period. But the sweetgrass, again, comes with teachings. It's 3 strands, body, mind, spirit. Each strand has 6 blades of grass, so there's 21 blades. And again, there's teachings with the 7 and the 21, etc. And each blade of grass has 2 sides, a smooth side and a prickly side. And that reminds us of our 2 sides of nature. So lots of teachings in there. So again, thank you, Chair Ruth, for that extra piece.
Oops. For those who can't see, I just spilled my water. So could use something to mop it up, thank you. In addition to National Indigenous History Month, it is also Pride Month. Oh, thank you so much. So we have Commissioner McDougall to say a few words about Pride Month.
Thank you, Chair Ruth. I was trying to decide the best way to chat about Pride Month and what I can say that is going to affect change. And I don't think any one person can say something that will affect change. We've been focusing on reconciliation, the Chief's apology, society as a whole is starting to swing. So the best way to look at what we need to do is where we've been. So instead, I've decided to pick at some historical moments in the history of gender and sexual diversity to share with you. So we'll start in pre-colonial Canada on Turtle Island, which was the Indigenous word for North America. They had recognized 5 genders, which included men, women, two-spirited men, two-spirited women, and trans people. This is before colonial, before Canada was instituted in 1867. 1841, the Criminal Code of Canada imposed the death penalty for all persons engaging in same-sex relations. 1918, the first Canadian, possibly the first North American LGBTQ2S publication was made in Montreal. It was called Les Mouches Fantastiques. In 1947, John Hebert, he was a drag queen and an employee of Eaton's in Toronto, was arrested for being dressed as a woman and is sentenced to 4 months in prison. 1964, George Clippert, a Northwest Territories mechanic, announced to the police that he was gay. He had engaged in sexual encounters with a variety of men and refused to change. In 1965, that same man is sentenced to life in prison as a dangerous offender, backed up by the Supreme Court of Canada. He is the last person to be sentenced in Canada before that legislation changed in 1969. 1968, Prime Minister Trudeau released a bill and the famous statement, "There is no place for the state in the bedroom of the nation." Significantly important in 1969 was the Stonewall riots. In 1971, George Everett Clippert was released from prison. 1973, homosexuality was removed from the Diagnostics and Statistics Manual as an illness or disease. 1981, 4 bathhouses in Toronto are raided by the Toronto Police. This mobilized the LGBTQ community to stand. 1985, Health Canada introduces a policy that's banning men who have sex with men from donating blood for life. 1990, the term Two-Spirit is coined at the 3rd Annual Intertribal Native American First Nations Gay and Lesbian Conference in Winnipeg. 1991, Delwyn Vrend, Human Rights Commission for being fired at a Christian college in Edmonton. 2002, police raid the only gay bathhouse in Calgary. 15 people are charged under the Body House laws. 2008, Health Canada releases new guidelines on organ donation, identifying men who have sex with men as a high-risk group and ban them from donating. 2017, Canada introduces alternative gender-neutral X markings on passport for people who do not identify with male or female. Those are just little tidbits I picked out so you can see how far we've come. We still have a ways to go. We are making strides. We are making change. Pride flags are being raised all over the place this month. I think it's important that you know what the colors on those pride flags are for. They don't single out individuals. They don't single out entities. They don't single out organizations. Their colors are red for life, orange for healing, yellow for sun, green for nature, the royal blue is for harmony, and the violet is for spirit. Given what's going on in the world today, reflect on those colors. Those are what brings people together. That's the essence of what we need as a society. It's not a matter of who you love, it's what we are as a society. And in closing, I'll leave you with 2 quotes from Harvey Milk. The first one is, rights are won only by those who make their voices heard. And the second one, hope is never silent. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and thank you both for the words you provided us here today. It's a very excellent way to open today's meeting, so I appreciate it. We now have the approval of the agenda, and unless somebody has an addition or a deletion, we can approve it by unanimous consent. I'm hearing none. The agenda is approved. Does any commissioner here have a conflict of interest with anything related to the agenda today? Hearing none, no commissioners have a conflict of interest. The consent agenda, was anything taken out of the consent agenda? Thank you. So again, by unanimous consent, we can accept the consent agenda. Hearing no objection. We now have a presentation, and we've got it on this. Okay. There we go. We've got it on the screen. Thank you very much. Presentation is by EMS, Mobile Integrated Healthcare. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So first I'd introduce myself. My name's Stephen Amrine. I'm the operations manager for the EMS Mobile Integrated Healthcare Program. This is a provincial program for North Sector, including Edmonton Zone. This is a provincial program operated by Alberta Health Services, EMS, with teams throughout the province, and I'm here specifically to talk about the history of our program, the guiding values of our program, and then some Edmonton Zone specific teams that operate in collaboration with EPS. So first of all, the goal of mobile integrated healthcare is to provide that single point of contact to the healthcare system for healthcare providers. The overall intent of our program is to improve access to healthcare. So while a lot of people will mention that our job is to keep people out of hospital, that's not the case. It's actually to improve access to healthcare, thereby reducing inappropriate reliance on the hospital system, EMS, ERs. As we all know, healthcare delivered in a hospital can be very expensive. And so our goal is to reduce those expenses by avoiding unnecessary trips to the hospital. We do this through providing or building strong relationships with care providers in community, both healthcare and otherwise. Basically, we try to work with the patient's circle of care, so their family physician, other healthcare providers, or social services that help provide that patient the care they need. And by doing that, we decrease the reliance on the hospital system. So why did we start this program? So first of all, paramedics are relatively new to the healthcare system, especially relatively new to healthcare as a healthcare profession as well. However, in the short time that they've operated in the traditional EMS or emergency work stream, they've proven themselves to be quite competent at providing healthcare outside hospitals in sometimes uncontrolled environments. So we took that basic skill base of paramedics and began working on retraining them from the emergency or 911 work to more of an urgent primary care area. So our program now operates, as we like to coin, a mobile urgent care center. So our paramedics operate in a single member SUV as opposed to a traditional ambulance. They do not respond to lights and sirens. They respond within a matter of minutes to hours. Sometimes 90 minutes is our target goal. And operate dressed in a non-traditional uniform, as you can see what I'm wearing, more of a business casual with a polo t-shirt, to try and differentiate themselves from that emergency workflow to more of that collegial, collaborative, patient-centered healthcare delivery. So our program is relatively new. We started operating in 2013 in Calgary Zone specifically. Our program was created out of the response of a Health Quality Council of Alberta recommendation, at the time trying to look at ways to reduce ER overcrowding. In 2014, Edmonton quickly followed suit, starting their own program. And for those about 5 years, 4 to 5 years, the program operated as two distinct different zone-based programs working just within either their respective municipalities. In 2018, the program was provincialized as part of the Enhancing Care in the Community initiatives that were initiated. And we now have teams operating, as you can see, from Peace River all the way down to Medicine Hat and Lethbridge. Our program can be accessed by a number of different points or avenues. The first one is more of the traditional access point where the senior supportive living site or long-term care site calls our program through a non-911 number to provide care to one of their clients. This is usually the healthcare staff or the family physician that will provide us with that phone call with a specific request. For example, one of the patients is acting abnormal, has fallen and needs sutures, or has some other medical complaint that is not emergent in nature. Our second access point is through clinics and family referrals or family physician referrals, where they're able to send in a form with specific requests to our program, and we're able to arrange a timed appointment. So the first access point is just in time or at the time of need. The second access point is a anticipated need. So if someone's being discharged and requires additional treatments to support in community. The third point, which is a little bit more relevant, I think, to this group, is our EMS and community referral pathway. So we accept referrals from other community services, for example, the inner city groups, Boyle Macaulay Health Centre, Streetworks, WEAC, and other outreach services, who then call our program for a client who they've identified a need. We also receive requests through EPS and Addictions Mental Health for some of our other teams I'll get into in a minute. All our requests are coordinated through our coordination center, so not the traditional EMS dispatch center. It's a team of paramedics that do answer the phone through that 1833 access number, and they then coordinate with the caller to determine the best level of care, diverting a number of calls actually without actually needing support, but just helping the person on the phone navigate the healthcare system a bit more, identify the needs, the services that could help the patients with their need. The coordination center, though, then, if necessary, will send out our coordination team, or our care team, apologies. We always operate under medical direction, so be it the patient's family physician or nurse practitioner or another healthcare provider that is the most responsible prescriber for that patient. So this is a healthcare provider that knows the patient the best. So think your family physician or the physician of a supportive living site. We always attempt to work with that person first and foremost. That person knows the most about the patient. They have the history right there, and they're usually aware of the patient's condition before we arrive, either through the family or the healthcare staff at the supportive living site calling them. If we're unable to get a hold of that prescriber, we do have our own on-call team that we'll connect with. So this is a group of physicians that we call the Mobile Integrated Healthcare Online Medical Consultation Network, who then provide that medical direction for us. When we call these care providers, the goal is twofold. One, to ensure that the care provider is aware of us being out there, so we do not operate in a silo. We always try to work with the patient's care team, be it the nurse at the patient's bedside or the physician if they're not there, to develop a care plan and make them aware of what's going on with the patient and what we're accomplishing, and two, to make sure that we're not missing anything. The paramedics are very good at what they do, but they do not have the knowledge base of a physician or a nurse practitioner. I wouldn't pretend that. So they always have that consultation to ensure that they have all the information at hand and that they have a care plan that meets the patient's needs. Our team has a diverse set of skills. Up here on the list, we do pretty much anything you would expect in an urgent care center, from IV rehydration for a patient that might be dehydrated, to blood collection for a patient that might have an infection, urinary catheterization, wound care. We are able to dispense and facilitate prescription access to medications, blood transfusions, and also point-of-care testing right there by the bedside to help determine the patient's need and paint that picture, as it were, for the physician that we're consulting with on the phone. The biggest power that we bring to our patients is, one, our assessment skills. We provide a very in-depth assessment to help determine what the patient needs. And two, that healthcare system navigation. Being that our team operates almost on the periphery of healthcare, sometimes we're very good at navigating the healthcare system to figure out what the patient might need. So we're able to connect in with the different care providers, home care, family physicians, palliative care, and other such agencies. So I'll speak about our coordination center. So this is one of the teams that we operate within Edmonton zone. If you'll remember at the first diagram on our access point, that's the central hub of our program. They're our focal point. So this is a team of community paramedics who provide real-time solutions for the patients. Either EMS or another healthcare provider calls into the center, and then these paramedics in a call center similar to a dispatch site basically looks through the patient's history to determine what the patient needs. They can get a really good visual or a context of what the patient's condition is. So on their previous treatments that they've received, any other diagnostics or investigations that the patient's going under, they're able to look up, as well as connect with the patient's home care or case managers if appropriate. Because they're also in a dedicated coordination center, they're also able to access, for example, Addictions Mental Health or other services. And if necessary, they're able to link directly into the 911 dispatch system if the patient's too critical for our team to support. Crisis Response and EMS, or CREMS, I believe some might be familiar with this team. This is a program that we've been operating since 2014 with Alberta Health Services Addictions and Mental Health. This is a very unique team. We're very proud of it. It's a community paramedic partnered with a mental health therapist similar to PACT, but with a bit of a medical slant on it. So this team works very closely with Access 24/7, EMS providers, EPS, PACT, other programs. And their role is to provide that medical differentiation to a patient. So the example we always give is if the patient's confused or acting abnormally, we're not sure if that patient's experiencing mental crisis or some sort of mental health crisis, and that's where the PACT team comes in. The paramedic on the unit is able to do that physical assessment, medical assessment with the point-of-care testing and the other diagnostics that we carry, and then the mental health therapist is able to provide that mental health assessment and perspective. This team operates noon to midnight, 7 days a week, and though predominantly based in Edmonton, City of Edmonton, we do operate outside within the rest of Edmonton zone, so Sherwood Park, St. Albert, and other areas in relation with our PACT or wherever the need is. The third team that we operate is our city center team. So again, this is a very unique team for us. It's a van, as you can see, that acts as a mobile treatment center, basically. So these are two paramedics. They work Monday to Friday, and they provide the same list of skills that I mentioned. However, they have additional training in trauma-informed care, and harm reduction, and they work predominantly with the inner city population, so those that are most at risk and vulnerable, but also those that don't access the healthcare system as they should. They are very good at, I would say, helping to track down patients. For example, if a patient's discharged from the Royal Alex but is failing to do their follow-up care that they need, this team can help track down to deliver that outpatient care that they should have received. For example, IV antibiotic administration, the patient should be going to the outpatient department at the RAH. However, the patient fails to, this team can help deliver that care. They, again, work very closely with Boyle Macaulay, Streetworks, and the other agencies and drop-in sites and shelters to work with that population, as those are sort of the natural gathering areas of the patients. They're also currently working on a plan to look at the camps, above bank camps that are starting to form. And this team, ironically, is going through a bit of a rebuild right now. So lots more partnerships on the horizon that we haven't really formalized yet, but we're in discussions to develop. The last program we operate isn't a physical team, but it's an advocacy opportunity, I would say, for our patients. The CHAPS, or Community Health and Pre-Hospital Support Program, is again managed by that coordination center, and it's one of those not just-in-time referral pathways. So this was developed over 5 years ago by EMS as an opportunity for the paramedics on the ambulance to help advocate for their patient. Prior to all these other programs operating, we had already identified a need to improve the patients that we see access to healthcare. So this program was created where the paramedics complete a paper form or electronic form and submit it to a central intake email. That email is monitored by our coordination team, and then about 48 to 96 hours after the fact, they're able to go in, access the referral, and then do some investigation into the patient. So they assess the patient's risks, what opportunities there are to support the patient. This is to help the paramedics on the ambulance advocate for patients that need additional support to stay safely in community but aren't going to the hospital. So examples of grab bars or increased home care support is usually the outcome. However, a lot of our referrals do end up going to either CREMS, so the other mental health team that I mentioned a minute ago, to look at stabilization in community, as well as other addiction and mental health supports. These numbers we're really quite proud of. Provincially, MIH has as you can see, 7.6 admission rate. So every patient that we see, we do a follow-up 7 days after the fact to see what their outcome is. We're a new program, we're still learning. So we're really focused on process improvement and quality improvement. What we know is that 7-ish% of the patients that we support provincially safely remain or end up going to the hospital after the fact. The rest of them, the 92%, are able to safely stay in community without any adverse events. Those that do go to the hospital have not experienced any adverse events actually as well. Usually it comes down to a need for additional supports, or the patient does not respond to treatment and we decide to send them after the fact. In Edmonton zone last year, so this is 2019 data, we saw 4,580 patient events, and we were safely able to keep approximately 3,435 of those would have wound up in the hospital were it not for our program. This number is not exclusive to the teams I mentioned. We do also have another team that I did not present on, the community response team, which is dedicated to seniors' health in the supportive living sites. And that is my presentation. Yes, are there any questions?
Thank you. I'll start with the people in the room. Karen? Commissioner Kenzie?
Thank you for that. And one of your last points, I think, was probably the most important point for me, which was that if you looked at 4,500 individuals, 3,000 of them stayed out of the hospital. I think that's an important statistic, and you know, the story that everything else comes from.
Thank you.
So thank you for that. The other one is, you know, the city center team kind of works 9 to 5-ish.
Yeah.
Is there any move to make these services 24 hours, 24/7?
We would love to. Right now, they're just Monday to Friday. Our first step would be to make them 7 days a week, ideally. However, it always comes down to funding, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But that would be our goal. As I mentioned, that team is going through a bit of a redevelopment right now. So we're trying to solidify the new structure, and then we'll start looking at expansion of hours and services.
Okay, because I guess my question is around when are the calls for service, you know?
Yeah.
Late at night, early, you know, that early morning versus...
Yeah, we do have, our mental health, our crimes truck does work noon to midnight, so that does provide some overlap for
Okay.
care. Unfortunately, with the limited resources, we felt that was the biggest impact we could make when we looked at data.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Abman.
Thank you for the presentation. A couple of questions of clarification. What is considered a crisis in the community, or somebody who's in crisis in community?
So the CREMS team, or the crisis response team, they accept referrals from EMS or from addiction, the Anderson Hall Access 24/7 line, or EPS. So these are patients that have accessed some sort of support system for predominantly mental health or social crisis, quote unquote. So they've called 911, or someone's called 911 for them, and instead of transferring them to the hospital, this team is brought in to try and provide those additional supports. So we don't have a hard term for crisis. It's very subjective to the patient. So the way we've approached it is those that are accessing the 911 or the mental health services, that the clinicians, when they interact with them, have determined the need for immediate support or stabilization. Sometimes it can be, though not as simple, but a near eviction of a patient who doesn't know how to get additional housing, to someone who's been non-compliant with their medications and having a schizophrenic break, as it were. So quite a gambit of options.
Thank you. Who is considered a person at risk and vulnerable persons?
So that's a generic, sort of an overarching term. We use it for patients that are predominantly in this inner city, who are homeless or near homeless, and also suffering from addictions, mental health needs. Someone who basically is at risk for exploitation, as it were, maybe, for whatever reason. Either they're not able to cognitively take care of themselves, or through intoxication, they're at risk for exploitation, I would say. Really, we identify it as someone who is a heavy user of the shelters, or someone who doesn't have stable housing right now. That's predominantly who our city center team works with.
And the last one on clarity, what does system navigation look like?
So for us, system navigation is really just helping someone link with the healthcare system. So it depends on what the patient's needs. So if the person needs increased home care support, we link them into the home care through their home care process. If someone needs housing support, we link them in through social work to different housing agencies. We don't do the housing placement, we work with those that do that work. So we have an inventory of services and what they provide and how we access them, and then we, through judgment, identify what the patient needs, or we think the patient needs.
And that's all done before they're in a hospital, not sort of while, like, leading them through the system in the hospital?
Our program does it without sending them to the hospital.
Okay. And last question is, do you collect demographics?
Yes, through our e-Siren system, yeah.
Do you collect race-based demographics?
I do not believe so, no.
Is that something that you were considering, or HS considering?
I wouldn't know if HS is considering it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And because I can't see anybody who is at home, I will go down the list and then come back to another question here. Commissioner O'Brien, any questions? Okay. Commissioner Cartmell?
None for me, thank you.
Commissioner Hussainli?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Hahn?
Yeah, I do want to ask a couple questions about your work with REACH. I mean, REACH is another organization, I'm going to talk about that a bit more later, who is exactly the kind of community partner that EPS is working with, and obviously you folks are too. In the month of May, REACH got their crisis diversion team got 117 referrals from EMS. Now, would that come from your folks? And just to carry on with that question, they also took 48 people to hospital. Would that have been done in coordination with your CRIMS people? Just how integrated are you with the crisis diversion team REACH?
So, sorry, not just to make sure I understood the question you're asking, REACH received a number of referrals from EMS and transport a certain number of people to hospital, and if that is done through our program?
I mean, your CRIMS, your EMS people, their referrals from EMS.
Yeah.
I guess I'm asking, do they come? Some of them come from CRIMS, I assume, and some come from other sources in EMS. I guess EMS is a general term. I just want to break that down into what exactly you guys do, your folks do with REACH.
Yeah. So REACH is a program we work with. If a patient's being transported to hospital from EMS via REACH, that would most likely be a referral from the 911 stream or the emergency ambulance, who has identified the patient for the need. Our CRIMS team does work with REACH. I don't have the exact numbers on how often we make those referrals, but we would be a number of those referrals, and we would also work with REACH. The REACH team would access our team possibly as well if they've come across a patient not through EMS.
Okay, I mean, that data would be good to know, I think, because what I'm getting at is that with all the things that have been going on lately and the requirement for EPS to work with community partners, is there more room to integrate what you folks do with REACH, and can that be expanded? Now, part of it is your operation. REACH is 24/7, you're not yet. Is there room for more integration between you and REACH in terms of being a bigger partner for EPS for things that they would do otherwise?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. You were very cut out.
Yeah, Laurie, you were really breaking up there. We actually didn't get any of that. I don't know if maybe you want to go back to your phone if it might work better, or try that again.
Let me try it again really quickly. Is there room for more integration between EMS and REACH as a sort of combined community partner to assist with things that would otherwise wind up on EPS's table?
Yeah, I think there's always opportunity for improved collaboration and coordination. It would just be, what would that look like? But we'd be very open to that conversation.
Okay, I think that's a conversation Big We should have.
Mm-hmm.
But thanks for the presentation.
Thank you. Commissioner Singh.
Oops, no questions, thank you.
And Commissioner Hamilton.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mickey?
Commissioner Hamilton.
Actually, I'm quite concerned about the duplication of services. I found this presentation, it was informative, but for me, I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done because it's very confusing as to who gets called and why they get called and who responds. So I think the chief is quite eloquent when he says we need to coordinate these services and not have 5 or 6 different arms trying to do the same thing.
Okay.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much. We really appreciated this. As you can see, there's a number of follow-up questions and I think some follow-up action plans.
Thank you.
So this is being very beneficial. Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Arnheim. Okay. Next on the agenda is the public portion of the meeting. Now, we do have a few speakers registered, and they are on the line. For their benefit, you each get 5 minutes, and in fairness to the other speakers, we will be holding you to 5 minutes. And we are going to start, the first speaker, Mr. Goodstriker. Can you please start?
Okay, Andakok Sultana, do you have a camera on me? Do you have a camera? Can you see my image?
We cannot.
Why not?
I don't know. Do you have your
That's
camera on?
systemic racism. That's systemic racism right there. Now, I have 5 minutes, and I will be talking about the racism of the Reform Party and one of your board members. I'll be talking about the racism of your Edmonton police chief, who is a Starlight Tour trained individual and somewhat of some kind of a Métis, I'm not sure. I have Métis blood in my family. It comes from Gabriel Dumont. I would like the chief of police to identify his lineage within this Métis claim he makes. So I have 5 minutes. I'm talking about the transparency of the Edmonton Police Service or lack of in regards to the Rossdale grave site rape site. For over 12 years, the city of Edmonton, every mayor and council have continuously raped this grave site, which became protected in 2005, but then it was illegally stolen by Don Iveson and his racist city council to build the Walterdale Bridge. Now, the Indigenous community has not received anything in return for that stolen half of a cemetery. Now, I'd like the EPS to open a file, or the police commission to open a file on its 112 years service of grave site rape in the city of Edmonton and disrespect for the 12,000-year tradition of the Blackfoot people living in this area. Now, as your commissioner started with the traditional territory, that's true. It's the traditional territory of the Cree who came to Treaty 7 and signed adhesion to Treaty 6 with a pipe. A pipe, not a goddamn eagle feather. That's a joke to Alberta Solicitor General. The pipe is equal to the Quran writings, the writings of Moses and the Jews, and the writings of the Christians. The pipe has equal weight. And Laurie Hahn should know that, but he is an ignorant person in Edmonton as a Reform Party member and a known racist to the Society of Indians in Canada. Now, 5 minutes is not a lot.
Mr. Goodstriker, I would ask you to just
I am a treaty Indian. I am a treaty Indian.
limit your comments, please,
Indian
to what you would like
here?
us to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm talking. Do I have 5 minutes or do I get interrupted again? So, the black file, Miss Black, the Blackfoot Indian, found in a dumpster on White Avenue by the Strathcona Police Union. Burnt. And now, apparently, there's a $40,000 reward for any information, while your police chief has done nothing in regards to that file, along with how many other files regarding murdered, missing women and the Edmonton Police Service. Ask yourself that, Commission. You're all racist because you have not done anything of substance regarding the TRC recommendation. Mr. Chief, Police Chief, I went to the TRC. I was having a sweat lodge ceremony.
Thank you, Mr. Goodstriker. That is 5 minutes.
And when I went to the TRC, I was
Mr.
harassed by
Goodstriker,
the
that has been 5 minutes. Thank you, sir.
EPS, which has a...
Thank you. And next, we have Ms. Moore. Ms. Moore, are you on the line? You have 5 minutes. Ms. Moore? Okay, I don't have the first name. I think she gave it when she called in. Melanie? I think it's Melanie Moore. I just happened to catch her when she first called in. She called in early. Okay. Ms. Moore, are you live? Well then, okay. Ms. Moore, can you hear us? Okay. Ms. Moore?
Hello.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry about the technical difficulties with that. You do have 5 minutes from now, not from when we first called. So go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Ruth and Commission members, for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Melanie Moore, and I've been the Neighborhood Watch Block Ambassador for 4.5 years in North Cromdale. It's a wonderful community surrounded by parks and open spaces, including Kennard Ravine, Stutchbury Park, Jane Salisbury Park, and Borden Park. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Every summer, you're not coming through. They hear me. We experience increased numbers of itinerant campers as well as social disorder that spills over from local festivals such as K-Days. I've involved many of my neighbors in reporting suspicious activities and incidents to park rangers and police. Needless to say, our work increases significantly during the warmer months. In a typical summer, I estimate I would make calls for service to the emergency and non-emergency police lines 2 or 3 times a month. This spring, we have experienced an increased occurrence of these events. In the last 2 weeks, I've been calling almost daily, and my neighbors have been reporting more frequently as well. These events include couples fighting in our parks and on our sidewalks at all hours of the night and day, increased camping on park space within meters of private residences and playgrounds, increased theft out of yards, cars, and garages, increased numbers of individuals who are obviously distressed. Last week, a woman was crying and distressed in the park, but she refused assistance when I offered. 2 days ago, a man, obviously psychotic, was in Jane Salisbury Park yelling at no one in particular and removing his clothing, talking incoherently. We already feel that we've experienced a whole summer's worth of activity, and the first day of summer has not even arrived. And what has changed? It was the emergency housing that the City of Edmonton put in place at the Expo Centre due to COVID-19 without any consultation with surrounding communities. The people who use the emergency services are constantly moving around our community now. While some of these vulnerable people are welcome as they quietly enjoy walks around our wonderful park space, there are those who have little respect for our parks and community. I want to commend Chief McPhee. Thank you for your focus on programs to tackle social disorder. We have had some excellent responses from the Edmonton Police Service to recent complaints about itinerant camping, increased crime, etc., but it can be inconsistent. For example, some call takers will insist that we contact the rangers about campers through 311. That takes 4 days for a response, during which time the campers disperse crime and garbage throughout our neighborhood. Other call takers accept that camping near residences and playgrounds is a police matter and agree to put forward a request for response. Downtown Division has been quite responsive this year to our complaints about campers close to our homes and to other social disorder incidents, for which we are very grateful. Their quick response makes us feel safe and respected in our communities that are now filled with families, children, and seniors out enjoying our park space more than ever. When the police are unable to respond quickly, we feel very vulnerable and powerless. Going forward, I recommend the following: that EPS officers become familiar with our community and the challenges the summer brings for those of us adjacent to park space. We would be happy to provide tours of our neighborhood and parks to the staff so that they could better understand our community. I often run into police members who aren't sure where the parks are and so on. A community-based EPS member to coordinate response to our concerns would be much appreciated. We are interested in proactive approaches to reducing social disorder in our neighborhood. For example, crime prevention through environmental design and other ideas that are proactive. And we are recommending consistent EPS responses to itinerant campers adjacent to residences and playgrounds. That's where we would like to see the emphasis. We request that you move the campers before they become too settled. In 1 week, a campsite can generate 1,000 square feet of garbage. Thank you again for this opportunity and the work that EPS does. We are happy when you have an increased presence in our community. We would like to see your services increase, not decrease. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much. The last speaker, Mr. Kinney, and I don't have a first name for him. Okay, we're good. Mr. Kinney?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. You can go ahead.
All right. Hello, Edmonton Police Commission. My name is Duncan Kinney. I am the Executive Director of Progress Alberta. We are a news media and advocacy nonprofit organization based here in Edmonton, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak with you. A part of our work around building a better world necessarily involves kind of police accountability, anti-racism work, and investigative journalism, and that's, broadly speaking, mostly what I'm going to talk to you about today, specifically on the transparency and oversight provided by the Edmonton Police Commission. But I just have to preface this that my comments are informed and influenced by the global uprisings against police brutality that have sprung up across North America after George Floyd was murdered by 4 cops in Minneapolis. As we look on in horror at each new instance of police brutality and violence against Black and Indigenous people across our city, with one story with an officer being charged with assault just this week, our province, and we look at these other incidents across our province and across our country, become increasingly clear that the police are not an institution that can be reformed. And I just want to say out loud and upfront that I am in favor of disarming, defunding, and dismantling the police. And I would encourage the commissioners of this institution to contemplate exactly what kind of institution that you are complicit in. I've also been struck by the unwillingness of the Edmonton Police Service to deal with basic media requests in a forthright manner, and instead forcing citizens and journalists to use the unwieldy, time-consuming, and very often expensive Freedom of Information Act in order to gain basic information about very simple things that the Edmonton Police Service is doing or what they are spending their money on. The most obvious case of this in action is Bashir Mohammed and his FOIP request for just what exactly armed police officers are doing in Edmonton public schools. His request for this very basic information has been met with a request to cover costs that total $64,000. That is unacceptable and clear evidence of a police force unwilling to provide information about what it is doing to the very people that it is supposed to be policing. But I personally have run up against this barrier in my own investigative work. After video surfaced of a Black man, Jean-Claude Rotundo, having a knee and shin of a police officer applied to his head in a manner very similar to what happened to George Floyd, There was an outcry, and it came to light that the Professional Standards Branch had conducted an investigation. In order to get a copy of that investigation, I have to file a FOIP request, pay $25, wait 90 days just to get an acknowledgement of receipt, and God knows how much longer before the actual report appears. And God willing, see, I do get this FOIP request back in a timely manner. The Edmonton Police Service, with its $356 million a year budget, is still providing information to people on compact discs. Just as an FYI, they don't sell new computers with compact disk drives anymore. But there's examples of this all over the place. During the last capital budget cycle, Edmonton City Council approved $6 million for specialized police equipment, with absolutely no mention of what the equipment might be. I cannot think of any other government department where something like that would happen, and where millions of dollars would go out the door where you don't even know what it is being spent on. I have a FOIP request in to discover what exactly this is being spent on, but my question to the Police Commission is, how is this not public information already? And to the Edmonton City Councillors who sit as commissioners, you believe that you're doing your job when you have no idea what $6 million is being spent on. I cannot think, again, of any other department under the City of Edmonton where a budget request like that would be approved with absolutely no information. These requests that I've made to the media team and to the Edmonton Police media team have not answered, and instead I've been forced to deal with this FOIP system. To the commissioners of the Edmonton Police Commission, the body ostensibly responsible for providing civilian oversight to the police, let's improve this deplorable state of transparency the citizens and media of Edmonton have to deal with. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kinney. That is it for the public speakers. Thank you very much. We had nobody else registered. We now go to number 8, the chief reports. 8.1, key issues.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and just want to share a few things and take a little bit of a time. Obviously, first and foremost, I want to acknowledge the men and women, both sworn and civilian, in our service. It's been a difficult time, as we all have been going through some difficulties, but I'm very proud of them. They continue to do their job, and they continue to do it well, and I think it's pretty important that that recognition comes through, and I just want to say thank you to them. Second, I want to talk a little bit about a few things that are happening, some on the good side, some on the maybe not so good side, but for the most part kind of put some balance in relation to what's happening. So today, Principal Hines and Muscatcheese Academy honored our downtown division with a parade where they brought out the drum ceremony, and they honored the members and basically stood there saying they're with us, stand with us and stand in support. And of course, that academy, we've been working in partnership for just about 10 years and has a lot of results that have proven to a lot of our Indigenous young people, which we're pretty proud to play a role in going on to graduate. I also want to take a minute. Earlier this week that we, for the first time ever, the Edmonton Police Service raised the Pride flag for a whole month, the month of June. And that was another achievement or another milestone in part of our apology and the path to reconciliation with our LGBTQ2S+ community, which we are committed to and now have posted the next steps online and continue to work with that community to work on reconciliation. I think I would like to really take a minute. I mean, Commission is no different than the police service right now. You're standing and you're listening to many angry people, and it's important that we listen, as we've all said, but I'm not so sure that anybody's acknowledged that the diversity that this Commission has. You're diverse, you represent various aspects of our community, you're as diverse as our communities. You're diverse in thought, you're diverse in education, diverse in language, diverse in gender, diverse in thinking. And I just want to compliment, and this is one thing I think Council got right. Not that I think they get a lot of things right, I should check that, but that's not lost on the police service. When we started down the path of change, we emulated what the Commission had done and what Council had did with the Commission, and you truly do represent our community, and we respect the work that you do. I want to talk to you a little bit of some crime stats and some things that we've been fortunate to do, just some stories to share that our people have. Today, we announced that a 25-year-old male is in custody for a rash of catalytic converters. An 18-person crew worked on this, as you all know. We've had hundreds of these taken over our community, and we arrested an individual with 400 of them that was running a ring at approximately $300,000 value. So hopefully that should take a dent out of what we've been seeing in the disruption of our communities, and including $196,000 of cash that this individual was obviously working with from his profiteering of other people's property. We also conducted a CDS search warrant. One of our new disruption teams, which is part of Vision 2020 search warrant, was executed. Located crack cocaine, fentanyl, cash. Neighbors come from all around to say thanks to the police officers for the work that they did in relation to this drug house. Again, dealing with both aspects of it. There was an arrest with our water team that's cleaning up some warrants and trying to find other ways in relation to our diversion unit rather than put them into the justice system. We had one individual, First Nations Indigenous male, said many years in Native politics, and added that all his interactions over the years have been positive and respectful, including the warrant arrest this week. So, you know, I think it's important that some of our stories get shared as well. We also see the not so good stuff out there as well. And some of those stories are SROs were a drive-through at Oliver Square when two males approached, and without provocation, the words were F you pigs. We don't need to use the language. The second male at oh you F die. You are a piece of, you can just fill in the blanks. Bottom line is our folks just stood there, they took it. There was no, these people were frustrated and they were mad and they were angry, and no charges were laid. And I just want to acknowledge that this restraint is being seen all over our city right now. I want to talk to you about a water balloon fight. On June 5th, the mother and her 3 young children were out walking and witnessed the stabbing. The mother provided first aid to the victim until the first responders arrived. Her children witnessed the event and are understandably traumatized. Constable Angela McMahon from Northwest Division visited the family as they were not doing well. On her own initiative, she arranged a water balloon fight between her entire squad and the kids and their friends in the neighborhood. So as you can see, community policing starts with relationships, and our folks are committed to that. And in addition to that, we've taken numerous firearms. Our unit seized a bunch of guns, 40 caliber loaded handgun, magazines, a whole pile of meth off the streets that were associated with the guns. More than 200 charges were laid in drug and weapons investigation as well during this time when the world is in a bit of turmoil. So some of the people that choose to disrupt our community don't stop and listen. Life continues on, and the actions of our police obviously need to live on and to move on as well. I want to now take a little bit of a minute to just kind of give you an update so it's on public record. We talked about Vision 2020. All of you endorsed it. We've talked about how we're going to drive change, how we wanted the new culture, how we wanted the service to look, act, and be. And so out of those 75 recommendations, which were kicked off on November 19th and aren't done, but even in the middle of COVID, in the middle of, you know, what happened in the tragic and criminal events in Minneapolis, we're 46 out of 75 recommendations done. And the goal is to redirect people in need away from the criminal justice system. And I think it's important. Redirect people in need away from the criminal justice system and towards agencies that can provide appropriate supports. That's right in our vision. As you know, you helped us build the strategic plan. This was built before the events of this, and this work continues. We built the Community Solutions Accelerator. There's always been critics, there always will be critical, but was a goal to get the business community engagement. This week, the group. We had one person on it, with others narrowed it down to 5 submissions. And it's quite exciting of where this is going to go, and potentially what can be done from outside the community to reduce the number of criminal activity in this environment. So we look forward to that. We've got 30 projects looking at through the accelerator, ways that we can do it quicker, ways that we can engage quicker, and ways that we can reduce the demand in the justice system. We've restructured the way our patrol operations work to have better on-street supervisions that gives frontline members more time to support and actively investigate files. We've introduced a new model of offender management to closely watch over the frequent offenders that just released from prison, with the goal that to hopefully keep them from going back. We've removed stale warrants from the criminal justice system to address criminal charges that will never be prosecuted, so to slow down intake. We've created teams specifically to locate and disrupt criminal activity. And on the other side of that, we've also domestic assault teams and specialized now working on one command structure to reduce demand. We've formed our own research arm within the Edmonton Police Service to continue and evaluate, to look at new ways of doing business. We're closely aligned with the University of Alberta, Inspector Dan Jones and Dr. Brian Rector. We've modified our IMAC unit, more responsibility to investigate, so we have more oversight and training of our frontline officers. We've done a ton of stuff, and I won't get into it in relation to training, looking at obviously becoming more trauma-informed and working with our community. We've created a new branch to assess value and impact for our resources and what we use them for within our community. We built a new strategic plan that was adopted in March. It was the first since 2013. We've changed our metrics in relation to getting away from times and how fast we get there, to try to make sure that we're trying to stop from going there all the time. We've got on the process of getting rid of the 8 key crime indicators, which really have no relevance to our, we need to look at our overall crime rate and what's disrupting our community and how we can slow that down. We've looked at how we can build a facility, potentially with a P3 with our other partners, to better establish training, including driving, how we approach the arrest tactics, how we obviously put some standardization with our other partners in our community, including, firearms range, and the list goes on. We've created a new bureau, first ever its kind in Canada, called Community Safety and Wellbeing. And this is towards agencies that we're going to work with partners to reduce the need for police demand reduction. We've launched HELP, which is basically the human-centered engagement liaison partnership with Boyle Street, to try to obviously reduce the need of our vulnerable population on the justice system. We've expanded diversions first across the city with the YMCA at-risk teens. We have our heavy users of service that supports reoffending criminals, trying to keep them obviously with our 50 of our most prolific offenders from disrupting our community. We've created a new division to formalize, strengthen the relationship with social service providers. I've been appointed to the Provincial Health and Addictions Committee to try to look at how we can influence change and positive change for supports in our community. We've provided pivotal input on the supervised consumption centers, and of course that ties in with the mental health and addictions plan. We have formal and informal connections with all kinds of organizations. We're forming a clear relationship with our downtown and our bids, because we think they're a partner that's underutilized, with a great voice and looking at forward, future-looking things. We've established a clear path forward to the issue of public naming of homicides. We've formalized the reconciliation process with the LGBTQ community, and we continue on that path. This is about probably 40% of them. So we've heard the community. We know they're frustrated. You've heard that. I think that's what you hired me for. And I just want to let you know that this plan is endorsed by all of our leadership team and all of our organization and reflects our strategic plan. Is there lots of work to do? You bet there is. Are we well on our way to potentially leading the country? You bet we are. But it's important that we take the voices and some of the rational voices that are being heard here, and we integrate them into our police service and even make it better, because nobody's perfect, but we have a path. And, I think in a large part of that, I credit you as the commission for allowing us to do that and approving it and continuing to walk beside us and provide the leadership and making sure that we have what it takes to get it done. So, we don't get to sometimes tell our story, and we're humble and we shouldn't tell our story, but at times like this, I think it's important that our public knows that we've heard them. We're going to continue to work. We're not perfect, but we're getting better each day. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to pause now for questions. Any from the commissioners in the room? Commissioner Ratman.
That is why we hired you. We hired you as a change agent. That was the expectation. And as one of the people on the hiring committee, that was much of our conversation. You listed a lot of trees, and I think it would be really helpful to talk about the forest, where you're trying to drive the Edmonton Police Service and the role, where you see the relationship evolving with the community in Edmonton.
Councillor Ampman, it's a great question. So, as we said often, defunding is one way of put it. When I said it, I think it's basically demand reduction. My goal as a police chief, which we know I'll never get there, but is to work my way out of a job. And the only way that policing can work their way out of a job is to partner with communities in relation to the vulnerable population, in relation to how we get them out of the justice system and into the right system to give them the appropriate care to get them on the path to recovery. I was in government for 6.5 years as a senior deputy minister, and I can honestly say that what gets measured is what we put into the system, but nobody really truly measures what we get out of the system, and out of the system means getting independence. And so if you look at what drives police work in relation to the social space, we all know what it is. It's mental health and addictions, it's trauma, it's domestic violence, it's some of the essential skills from lack of employment and poverty. We know that, and housing plays a role. But what I've also learned that if you only do one, you'll never be successful. You need to be able to do them all at the same time, put all the money and the resources, including ours, together in that space. And we need to do it well, and that's what community safety and well-being is, and that's why I think the path forward is law enforcement, public health. That said, on the other side of the criminal justice system, and Edmonton is not exempt from this. When we started, we have the third highest crime rate in the country. And the reality is there's criminals in this city that choose to disrupt our communities, they choose to hurt people, they choose to cause damage to people's property, and that is equally as serious. It's not one or the other. And our goal is to do both at the same time, but the only chance we have of being successful is the effective partnerships in our community and being resourced to be able to get it done. It's not about pushing money from our budget to theirs or money from here to there. It's about funding the system with the amount of money that's in the system, which I think if people actually knew would absolutely blow them away, but I don't think anybody can give them the answer. And that is a problem. But we're committed to being a leader to help our communities and get under our communities, because if it's us on top of our communities, it'll never work. But the new path forward is to get underneath our communities, to empower them with obviously our support, both by presence, by data, and other things to actually help them change their communities. Because if you look at success and you study any community that's been successful, it's generally somebody from the internal community. If you look in the First Nations community, and like Karen has mentioned, it's usually a grandma or an elder or somebody that wasn't necessarily in a position of power, but they had a voice that people followed. if you look at some of the smaller villages that have done it, it's generally the high school principal has stood up and everybody got underneath them and they realized the power of education, and that if you you graduate from grade 12 and if you go on to post-secondary, the science is that the rate from being in the justice system between marginalized and non-marginalized goes to zero. But to do that, that's why you need to be in schools, and that's why schools are an important part to this as well, because it's a bit of an equalizer. And there's lots of data, and we've done lots of research on that. But that's the path. Is it easy? No. But is it easy to get 20% by putting people together? Absolutely it is. Start with 20, then go after the next 10. Don't try to get 100% all the time, because you'll never get out of the starting gates.
Thank you. Commissioner McKenzie.
Thank you for that, and I'll echo Commissioner Appman's words about we were excited to hire you, and we thought we got the Connor McDavid of the law enforcement.
Don't ask me to keep up with him.
But I guess my question is around transparency and the role of media. So we never hear these stories in the media, but we do hear, incidents that happen and I guess should be addressed. And I guess the public is saying, that's not, I guess my question is, that's not Edmonton Police Service, but it is an incident and it needs to be addressed. And it takes away sometimes from the work that's being done.
Yeah.
So how do you address that?
No, it's a great point, Councillor McKenzie, and I mean, let's face it, police accountability and police oversight, independent oversight on discipline, I think is long overdue. Independence, it's long overdue, and I think I've heard that over and over and over. We asked for that in the Edmonton Police Service years ago. As president of the Alberta Association of Chiefs of Police, we again asked for that several months ago. And I think we're finally to the point where it's a weird environment when you see that the police service, the police association, the criminal trial lawyers association, the public are all on the same page. So let's put that one as a start. The positive stuff, you're right, but positives a lot of time don't get media attention, and media is busy. So I think part of that is we have to take it upon ourselves. We have the ability on ourselves to start telling our own stories. And at the end of the day, just like Musketish today, they come and told their story for us. And to me, it's not necessarily the outward facing stuff, because we're not in this for the glory, we're in this for the difference. And when you see your partners stand up with you and have a drum ceremony, that's to me, that means way more to me than me standing in front and doing a media interview to tell us about all the good work. That means that the community respects what you do. So, some of those things I think also we got to recognize with our partners, and it's our partners that are going to get it through, and that's the media we need. Does it necessarily need to be publicly exposed? No, but does it need to be celebrated internally? You bet. Because why do you celebrate it internally? Because every time you celebrate it, you do more.
And one last question, and it's partly another teaching. One of our community members of the public was speaking and questioning Chief McPhee's Métis heritage and so on. And it's not up to him to say he's Métis, though he has. It's for the community to say, you're one of us, come in. And he has certainly been welcomed, and the community is excited and welcoming him and invited him to speak at a gathering of 1,000 Métis youth and elders from across the province at the end of February. So, again, that's what acceptance.
I'm honored and humbled, Councillor McKenzie, with that. And, truth be known, as the gentleman that spoke earlier about Gabriel Dumont, we're probably related somewhere down, because it is French Métis, and it is the Red River Settlement, and I have the book, but if we're trying to put our credentials through a book, we're in the wrong starting place here. This is about our community. The community of Edmonton is diverse, and if this is about credentials, I certainly can produce those, but oh man, if that's our starting point, I think we're a little bit behind the game.
Thank you. Now I'll go to the phones. Commissioner O'Brien? Commissioner Cartmel?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Hussainli?
No questions, thanks.
Commissioner Hahn?
Yeah, just a quick comment, and wave at me if I break up. But Chief, your troops need a good hug, and I know you know that because they are doing great work. But I've heard from a number of people, many of whom people in this room know, who are afraid to speak up in support of EPS because of the backlash they're afraid they're going to get from some of the less rational people out there. So, I encourage them to, screw up the courage to do that, because we need, obviously angry people will speak up faster than happy people, and that's what we're hearing. Not that they don't have things to be angry about, we understand that. But everybody should be speaking up who wants to speak up without fear of reprisal. Anyway, keep it up.
Yeah, and just to comment on that, Commissioner Hahn, is we've got lots of letters and lots of support, but you know what? I want to be very clear. The Edmonton Police Service is never going to ask somebody that doesn't feel safe to speak up, because that's not our position. It's our relationships with our community. We value them. They're a big part of it. I mean, let's face it. It's we've had a community policing model for years, and you can't do community policing without having your community. Can we do better at it, and are we destined to do that under Deputy Veach's bureau that we've created and stood up and created a new bureau with the responsibility of the Deputy Chief? So that means it's equally as important than operational services or our CPB, which is our patrol bureau, or our HR bureau. It's equally as important, and that's a stamp that we're pretty proud to put out there. But I just want to urge and caution, a couple things. If people are getting threatened, let us know, because that's not acceptable. But at the same time, we don't want to put anybody in harm's way for speaking up.
Understood.
Thank you. Commissioner Singh?
No questions, except to make the comment that, I wish I could say I was surprised by any of this, but this has just been totally consistent with my experience with EPS throughout my time on the commission, and I commend you for putting together such a comprehensive report.
Thank you. Commissioner Hamilton?
Thank you. I echo what Commissioner Singh said with respect to this is a reiteration of a lot of work that you've, told us about over the past year, Chief. One of the questions that I think arose for me and is maybe a good discussion point is you're talking a lot about your role in terms of bringing together AHS, you're bringing together community support, you're bringing together many of the groups that are working in this space. And I think everyone is working towards the mutual goal of eradication of poverty. But why are you the convener? Why is EPS the convener on this? Why not AHS or another order of government? That's my question for you on this.
Yeah, well, I think that's our role. We're the leaders in community safety and well-being. If we're not, we should be. And there's a couple reasons. We're the only autonomous voice. We're the only group that can actually speak up. If and it's by design. Like if you're looking at AHS, it's provincial government. If you're looking at school boards, it's funded provincial government. If you look at if you go through the list, social services, child service, it's funded by the province, and the police are the city. But as you know, probably better than anybody on the call, all we're talking about here is city resources, and I think the city is a small portion of the resources that actually exist in our city. And it's, again, as I said before, and maybe I didn't use the right language, I say we got to wire the house, but this has got to get connected, because, at the last time I checked, there's one taxpayer in Alberta, and we all pay the taxes to the same place. And, the weird part is that we jump from an argument of putting people at the center to money. And as money goes, and if you just throw money at the situation, it's not lost that we're not getting outcomes. But if you put teams in place to work collectively together and they don't have to worry about sustainability, then you actually get outcomes. And, you know, I based on my last role in government and understanding funding and obviously chairing the deputies at the federal, provincial, territorial deputies for Canada, I would hate to venture to guess to add all the money up in the city of Edmonton, even if you took the downtown core, for instance, which, you know, takes a lot of heat. And in the Chinese business community, who's extremely, you know, they're just kind of the flagship. They just continue to go on, and they're frustrated, and we need to get underneath them. But I think somebody needs to start adding the total the bill up here, and not trying to look at this whether it's a health budget or a police budget, or, you know, if we're funding a community program. I'd be just curious to see if anybody could ever get that number. I think I probably could guess, but I think we'd be shocked if we saw it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, he disappeared again. Commissioner O'Brien appeared on the screen. I wonder if he had a question, but he's gone again, so perhaps not. If there are no more questions, then thank you very much, and we can go on to the next matter on the agenda, which is 8.2.1, Diversity and Inclusion Policy.
I'm going to start, and I'm going to ask Nino Care to come down or to speak to it. Is there a mic up there?
Yeah, I got a mic.
Oh, okay, you got a mic, okay. Just in relation to this, we've done a lot of work. We have an equity, inclusion, human rights branch, which was tasked with providing strategic direction for the EPS, and then 2017 was the fair and equitable policing policy, and then there's the bias awareness management procedure, 2017 as well, an equitable, diverse, and inclusive workplace in 2020. In the last 5 years, this unit has conducted 6 internal investigations, you know, from various forms internally, complaints of harassment related to race, 3 on civilian, 2 on sworn, or 3 on sworn. But I just want Nina to kind of walk through, because this is a pretty comprehensive document. I've seen a lot of these. I'm not sure that I've seen a better one, and I think it's just worth having him and Lori Sloan and the folks that have done this work, which is a brand new unit for us, by the way, just to speak to this.
Thank you very much, Chief. Can everyone hear me? So this work started at the tail end of our strategic planning process when we were building our 4th goal, which is grow diverse talents. From there, we were having discussions about diversity inclusion and realized, you know, we need to codify and we need organizational definitions of what these terms are. So that was the first task once we completed the strategic plan, was to build out a definition for an equitable, diverse, and inclusive workplace policy. And that's what you see before you. So for the benefits of those who don't have it, if you don't mind, I'm going to read a few of the definitions, just so we understand the direction of where the Edmonton Police Service is going, and kind of where we're going to be turning the organization to. So diversity would be the range of human difference, experiences, and perspectives. Diversity includes protected grounds listed in the Alberta Human Rights Act, and also includes but not limited to differences in personality, thoughts, life experience, learning styles, and working styles and viewpoints. And then equity, acknowledging that people have diverse needs to achieve a common outcome. So equity involves examining and recognizing the root causes of inequality and removing systemic barriers to ensure each person can access the opportunities, network, resources, and supports they need. Equity is distinct from equality, which involves treating each person the same regardless of their diverse needs. Inclusion, valuing and embracing diversity to ensure the active participation and contribution of all individuals and groups. Inclusive environments are welcome and embrace differences while viewing them as strengths in creating an innovative and forward-thinking organization. As the Chief has touched on, we've been working through a reconciliation process, but it's one thing to say the word, it's another thing to actually define it and bring it in the organization. So reconciliation for the Edmonton Police Services, it's an inclusive process that requires involved parties coming together for the restoration of healthy and respectful relationships. And the last one that we would have here is something that is quite important, and it's a treaty acknowledgement and creating information and building more building information around understanding the treaty. So the treaty signed between the Crown and Indigenous nations to speech the continuation of sharing resources, protection and healthy relationships, and acknowledging the treaty and people whose land we occupy is an important step in addressing truth and reconciliation efforts. So this is the direction that the service is heading. This is built by the folks in the Equity and Inclusion branch, but supported by other folks within this organization. So with that, I would take any questions or welcome any questions from the Commission.
Thank you very much. This time I think I'll go to the phones first. And Commissioner Hamilton.
Nothing from me, thank you. Thanks for that presentation, Aninia.
Thank you. Commissioner Singh?
Nothing for me. This looks like a great policy.
Commissioner Hahn?
All good, thank you.
Commissioner Hussainli?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Cartmel?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner O'Brien? Oh, perfect. Questions from here? What? I'm told we're good. Thank you very much for the presentation. Oh, no, well, Commissioner Atman's shy, but...
You good with a hard one? Okay, the whole culture eats policy for lunch. I think it'd be good to talk about, one, the culture required to effectively implement a policy like this, and two, what you're doing to get the service to that culture.
I'll take the first shot at that, being that I worked at this in 6.5 years in government and went to the same meetings all the time. So, I mean, I think the language is culture eats strategy for breakfast. The reality is structure changes the whole game. So we change structure first, prioritize what's important, and now we send the culture down through it, so it automatically changes with it. So by standing up a Community Safety and Wellbeing Bureau and standing up a value and impact in a research unit, we've changed the way we're going to approach. So now the culture automatically goes with the structure, and then you just make sure that you basically hold it accountable to make sure you get it done. A lot of organizations, in my own professional experience, never get by the strategy and the culture because they get hung up on how you're going to change it because they've never tried something new, and it just basically goes back to the old way after a period of time. But when you change structure and you send shock or you send disruption, then you feed into the culture and you actually get the strategy right. So as we did Vision in 2020, we changed the structure shockwave. We built the strategic plan with the Commission, which we're still got some community engagement to go when COVID's actually done. And then we've actually changed the framework to operate from with the accountability measures to hold it accountable. So, anybody that's done change management has been successful. You get successful quicker if you put some shock into the system.
And Chief, if I may. And dovetailing on that, I think the Chief just spoke rightly to Vision 2020 and the manner that we built that, which is a collective from the folks that at the Edmonton Police Service. This was something that was asked for by the organization. So this shift has been happening in terms of we actually need a definition for this. But furthermore, it wasn't built within just the silo of one particular branch. There was input from within the organization, external to the organization, so that we don't have to explain this. This is built from within, and that's the first step in terms of building that culture and having that understanding. There's a need and there was a demand, and we fit that demand, but it was done in an inclusive manner. So I hope that gets to kind of the heart of your question as well.
Commissioner McKenzie.
One of the things that you can, I guess, measure a change in culture without really measuring it is to hear a change in the language that's being used. And so I appreciate the policy brings in some new language such as reconciliation, treaty acknowledgement, and so on. But is there other things that you hear? I remember working with a government department, and it was proposed that they worked with frontline citizens, and someone said, we'd like to delight our customers. And right away it was, we're government, we don't delight anyone. So my question is, are you hearing some of the changes in the way people speak with each other?
Absolutely. I would say that in a lot of the conversations I end up having, we're having conversations about vulnerability. We're having conversations about bias awareness. There is an actual reaching into my division for expertise and help when it comes to building the training that some of the training the chief speaking about in Indigenous historical trauma. Trauma-informed policing. So not trauma in terms of like blunt force trauma, but like trauma that leads from, say, adverse childhood experiences. The requests that we get signify there's an appetite and hunger for knowledge on this, and then from there translate that or transition that to actual like applicable in day-to-day use. So we as a division, and I know other folks who are here will say there's no shortage of work for us, but that's good. This is going to be a long road ahead of us, but there is a demand there.
Great, thank you.
I just have one quick question. You do mention that you want people to bring their authentic selves. Are you actively finding a way to have them bring their authentic selves and encourage that?
Well, I would hope that when folks see my loud suits every day, they know I'm bringing my authentic self to work each day. But I think it's just putting out what you want folks to emulate. And that starts at the executive table, and that starts with people being sincere. I think if you guys were able to hear some of the conversations that happen, there is a lot of differing opinions. We actually get through 2 decisions through an iterative process. That's where this starts, that you can think for yourself, you can bring all the skills that we use to recruit you, and then try to actually advance our organization through the strength of its diversity. So it's emulating it, it's being the change that you want to see, but it's also giving an opportunity for people to be authentic, vulnerable, fail, and then bring them back to the table as well.
Thank you, and we do appreciate the suits. Next is 8.3, which is the Edmonton Police Service racism response.
So with that, that's a follow-ups from some of the discussions that we've already been having and the chief has already touched on, but not focusing on racism per se. We're going to talk about what we're doing in the community in terms of community engagement and creating different opportunities for folks within the service to engage with the community. So in terms of that, like the equity and inclusion branch that we've spoken for it has a community relations section. So this is a team that builds relationships with diverse, emerging, and Indigenous communities and assisting them with navigating the EPS and liaising with appropriate areas specific to community-identified issues and concerns. So they work in partnership with many internal areas of the EPS to ensure that they're developing meaningful relationships with the communities we serve. So highlighting that community relations section, we deliver the following initiatives. So the police and community engagement team, the PACE team, and that was born out of the work that came here with the commission. So it started out with around 10 folks who were assigned to other areas, like this isn't their regular duties, but they wanted to ensure that they were immersed in the community. So from 2018 to now present day, we have now, I believe, over 40 members. So like I've been saying, the demand continues to grow in terms of this is something the organization values, and this is something our members value, that they want to spend extra time being immersed in the community, seeing the best of the community and having the community see the best of them. So within that, we also work in partnership with our hate crimes and violent extremism unit. And when it comes to racism within the community, we have a dedicated hate crimes unit that does incredible work, has very strong relationships with the community, that they know that they can call that sergeant and they're going to get a very fair, equitable, and compassionate response to addressing some of the horrors that we do see in our society. We have the Chiefs Community Council, which is going to be the new iteration of the previous Chiefs Advisory Council that is going to be bringing folks together, like the chief has says, to ensure that we're focusing on root cause issues, ensure that we're trying to move upstream, but harnessing the talent and the diverse talent of the folks in the city of Edmonton that isn't going to be siloed by ethnocultural or ethnocultural markers. And then we have the partnership framework as well as the LGBTQ reconciliation process. So there are a lot of things that we're actively doing within community that is meant to build those relationships, build those partnerships. We have a long ways to go, but what I am proud to say is that there are a lot of folks who do want to step up and do that work, because that is that is community policing, that is being a member of, being reflective of your community.
Just in addition, I mean, they've done just a bunch of things, and I think Indigenous is just scratching the surface, but one of them that's really unique is working with our First Nations, former CAC Indigenous, or the Chiefs Council, to do a compassion series, which is a series of videos, Councillor McKenzie, you'd kind of appreciate. It's kind of like digitizing a circle. So, I mean, you know, that, how do you build that? You take bits and pieces from all of our diverse communities, and you can learn a lot on how you can actually better integrate, and you can actually take some of the lessons of some cultures and as teachings into others. But, you know, you obviously need to be welcomed by the community, and to do that, you have to have a relationship. So that's why the additional resources to build the relationships, because implementation is more important than the strategy.
And Chief, if I may, there is one point that I would want to ensure that we get across, is that, especially when it comes to Indigenous relations. So the EPS is working with an external consultant to conduct a systemic review of all our policies, practice, in alignment with the recommendations of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls final report, the Royal Commission report, Broken Trust report, and the Truth and Reconciliation report. So we started this late last year, because understanding that we need to look at things internally as well. It's one thing to say that we're going to do community engagement, but the other side of that is ensuring that you are doing what you need within your own house and looking introspectively to ensure that we can take progressive steps there as well. So we're continuing to work with the consultant to ensure that it is all synthesized into something that we can use, that is tangible, then there's recommendations made, and then from there we'll start looking at those next steps from there. But I want to ensure that while we are in this time, that we folks have a voice, that it's not lost on the citizens of Edmonton, that Edmonton Police Service is listening to those Indigenous voices as well, and we're actively working.
Thank you. Do I have any questions on anything related to that presentation? Commissioner Appman.
I mean, racism is such an insidious, awful thing, and for people who are racialized, I mean, you deal with it every single day. It's not being called names. It's the 16-year-old kid who knows his principal is scared of him because of how he looks, or the Indigenous guy who goes to a board retreat and is asked if he's lost because he doesn't look like he belongs in that room. All the things you've talked about, the thing that I'm seeing making the biggest difference, or the only thing I've seen really impact racist views, is bringing people together. I'm seeing a lot more of that. It's really hard for me to have a negative stereotype about you if I've met you and I am friends with you. And so doing that, I think, has been one of the things that's made the biggest impact. I also think it's really important to recognize that when you bring two people together who may be fearful of each other because they don't know each other, you throw a power dynamic into that, and it's that much more chaotic, or potential to be chaotic. So I think acknowledging that has been really significant. And again, getting out into community and meeting people so that I don't have to fall back on my stereotypes of what the other looks like. I have lived experience and can apply that to somebody who I don't know, because I'm not judging them by how they look. I'm judging them by the actions that they take. So I think I've appreciated a lot of the work that's gone into making those connections.
Thank you. I'll go to the phones now. Commissioner O'Brien? Nothing there, so I'll imagine a shaking of the head. Commissioner Cartmell? Yeah, thank you.
Nothing for me, thank you.
Commissioner Hussainli?
I'm good, thank you.
Commissioner Hahn?
I'm good, thanks.
Commissioner Singh?
Very good, thank you.
Commissioner Hamilton?
I did have one question. I've had previous contact with EPS and REACH on the issue of hate crimes and racism in communities. And one of the gaps I've observed, though there's official services through the hate crimes unit, a lot of acts of racism and hate fall under the sort of legal definition of hate, but yet leaves communities feeling really vulnerable, leaves individuals feeling really vulnerable. And I was wondering if you had any ideas or programs that help build, I don't want to use the term capacity, but a toolkit, for instance, to help communities that might be dealing with acts of hate, especially racially motivated hate, or if that's something you're working with partners on.
You know, we just had that. Obviously, it wasn't a hate crime by definition of the law, but you know, in our Muslim community and in the mosques, and you know, working that through with our partners, and you know, what that's going to lead to is how do we become more responsive, and how do we actually. I think it starts with the understanding how the community is feeling. Right now, everything's impacted by COVID-19. But this is a potential moving target in relation to what? I mean, there's hate and there's bias and all, you know, training and stuff, but I'm not necessarily sure this is going to be a training situation. It's actually getting back into the community, listen to the community to see what they're feeling, and then, you know, having a bit of a checklist of the resources, both professional, you know, and there's some really strong work done by our academic institutions in this, and I think back to the partnerships, this is where you start bringing the right resources to the table in partnership to actually address it and leave them, the community, with an understanding or a feeling, the police with a feeling as a service provider, what they can do to help. But I think more importantly, though, is, you know, you see this all around, is when community doesn't have any idea what to do and nobody's talked to them. And this is all over the province, and it's not just in the cities. It's sometimes it's a rural crime or a rural issue, and you know, people are left wondering, and that fear remains. So part of this is the follow-up, and you know, I don't know if there's necessarily a science. There's lots of different programs in relation to, not programs, but studies done in relation to academia. But I think it's just important that we become that facilitator to bring the right resources to the table to give some comfort to the community, because let's face it, a lot of this doesn't end up in a criminal court, but it doesn't mean people don't feel like they should be charged criminally, or doesn't feel like they've been violated, and that needs to be repaired.
Chief, if I may?
Go ahead, Ian.
Yeah. And further to that, Councillor Hamilton, it is also going to be incumbent on us to figure out what that process is going to be. So the incident that the chief was speaking about originally went out to our hate crimes unit. But with that, the hate crimes unit worked in partnership with the community relations section in terms of bringing our partners together, like the Al Rashid Mosque, AMPAC, having discussions as to, okay, well, here's what we can do right now, but we need to ensure that the folks of the community also know that this doesn't go unnoticed. So how do we, with our partners, amplify those voices and amplify the message out to the folks in the respective communities to know that this is something that the police is actively investigating. This is something that, yeah, we do seem to be deemed to be unacceptable, and you're not sitting there in a vacuum of information thinking that, you know what, you live in a city or you live in a country that this is going to be tolerated, or people are going to turn a blind eye. So it's continuing to build those partnerships with our communities, that we can continue to amplify the message so the citizens can ensure that from whether it's coming from our Twitter account or it's coming from a trusted voice, that they do know that their concerns are being heard.
Great. Thank you, E. Thank you, Chief McPhee.
Thank you. Any questions from this panel? Thank you very much for that. And the last item that we have under the Chief's report is body-worn cameras.
Madam Chair, so in relation to body-worn cameras, there's Obviously, been a lot of voice out there. Edmonton Police Service should have body-worn cameras. And I've clearly stated, but I'll just state it for the commission as well, is I think when we look at body-worn cameras, first and foremost, we need to understand that just recently there was a study done where it pulled all 70 studies together and did an evaluation of all of the evaluations. And what it basically says is there's nothing to correlate between increased public trust, better results in relation to police wearing body-worn cameras. So the premise of that is there's a couple things. Obviously, it's a camera that's outward focusing, has a small snapshot in time, isn't really looking at the officer's behavior, but it's looking at the other individual's behavior. But then when you actually start to look at it, it's $4 to $6 million roughly, another 1 to 2, probably closer to $2 million for the EPS annualized to do this. In times like this, we think there's way more value to invest in the person behind the camera and the training and some of the training things that have been talked about and some of the things that we discussed, and then also into the community to ensure that we're building that trust and support within the community. So that said, we are going to move forward with dash cams. Dash cams are a bit different. It's a lot of our critical incidents involve a vehicle going somewhere. It gives a broader range, a more peripheral view, 300-foot range with a mic, so it's got recorded as well. And that actually tells the whole story. So looking at that, I know the Prime Minister came out a short while ago and said that he's recommending the provinces everybody wear body cams, but if somebody externally wants to pay for that, and I'm saying not the commission or the city, because I think it's low value, low impact, we'll wear them. But I just don't think it's good value for our money. But we're expediting our work that was already ongoing, as you know, in relation to the in-car dash cams, and that work is underway as we speak.
Thank you very much. Questions? Go to the phones again. Commissioner Hamilton. Commissioner Singh. Sorry.
Sorry, you caught me off guard a little bit.
Mixing it up.
I would be, I guess it's more of a comment, Chief. I'd be interested in hearing maybe a more fulsome discussion or presentation on the types of questions that you asked, or you and your team will be asking as you assess body-worn cameras versus dash cams. Because I think, and I don't expect you to have that answer at that time, but I know even anecdotally, when you start talking about body-worn cameras, questions arise in terms of data storage, interviews with, I think just a lot of things arise. So I think at maybe another point, perhaps when you bring back the issue on the dash cams, I think it would be interesting to hear, for the benefit of the public, how you came to that decision and some of the tricky legal areas or tricky areas of policing that arise when you start talking about either body-worn cameras or dash cams.
We could answer that now if you want it. CITO Anderson, Ron Anderson, has got pretty extensive background in this area, or do you want it to wait?
I mean, I would say briefly now, but I imagine it will still come up when the dash cam question comes back to us. So if you want to answer briefly now, I still think it would be a benefit to hear it in comparison to dash cams when that arises.
Yep, thank you. It's Ron Anderson. I'll speak briefly on the matter, try and keep my comments short. I'll just try to provide a little bit of historical context in the body cam rollouts that have taken place across North America. Most of this started around the same time as the Eric Garner case in the United States, and the rationale for putting forward the body cameras was around accountability of the police, particularly around the use of force. At the same time, the federal government provided $263 million worth of grants to implement body cameras in response to that particular incident. So the proliferation of the body cams in the United States was largely driven due to public demand and through the funding streams that were available at the federal level. Those funding streams, however, were only for capital and did not provide for operating expenses. Since that time, and the Chief has already referenced, there's been 70 evaluations, including an evaluation that was done in Edmonton in 2015 around the use of body cams. The results of those, as the Chief has mentioned, show that there doesn't seem to be a reduced use of force or a particular increase in the trust with regard to the police in the use of those body cams. And that's quite evident today, and that a lot of the services that are being referenced in the media today are utilizing body cams. In the Canadian context, the police agencies in Canada took a much more cautious approach, and particularly there was no federal funding available for implementation. So most agencies, including Edmonton, wanted to do an evaluation of their own or wait for evaluations to take place. Edmonton's own study is, of course, available on our webpage and can be accessed for review. Toronto also did a study in 2016. A lot of the same findings as we had in our case. One interesting tidbit from theirs is regard to the amount of officer time that's lost for the administration of the video. So 6% of officer time is lost in total for simply downloading, redacting, and categorizing the video at the end of each shift. So if you're looking at the costs of ownership piece, that's not included in the roughly $2 million cost that would be incurred for Edmonton Police Service. The only major police service in Canada that's gone down that road is Calgary, and they're yet to release an evaluation on their present implementation. With regards to the difference between the body cameras and the in-car cameras, the Chief referenced that the in-car camera captures a much wider display, and in most cases would be capturing the officer's actions as well as the individual that's being dealt with. Presently, if you look at the body cameras, they have quite a narrow display. There are some durability issues with regards to cameras that was mentioned in our 2015 study that have been addressed in some respect since that time. The in-car cameras also allow for triggering to be done based on lights and sirens or through other mechanisms, so the officer interaction or the choice of whether to turn on the camera or not can be alleviated through the means in which the cameras can be triggered. So there are a number of differences in regard to that, and with regard to the second piece on the in-car cameras, they also capture the officer interaction to ensure the safety of the individual being transported as well. So you have the camera recording the interaction in the vehicle for accountability measures there as well. So in the case of a body camera, that's not going to be the case. So there are a number of different differences. We can certainly return with a presentation specific to the differences between the two technologies. We're certainly open to doing that. And lastly, as was mentioned previously, the most body cameras in use in the world today are in the United States, and we aren't seeing the reductions in the use of force that were expected from these technologies at this point after about 5 years of being open and available in the marketplace. The technology has improved, the cameras have improved, the durability has improved, the costs at the back end have not substantially improved, and neither has the effect that they were expected to have. The study the Chief referenced is public. We can certainly provide that to the Commission for their use as well as the public. It's a publicly available document. So we have requested if we'd be able to post that on our webpage. We're yet to receive a response back from the researchers as of yet, however.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Singh.
Hi. So, I have a little bit of difficulty with the reliance or the level of reliance being placed on this study because, we hear that there's been no difference in outcomes. There's been no difference in behaviors. And, I know one of the arguments commonly proffered by different jurisdictions when the camera proposals have been made is that officers will be less effective. They'll be subject to additional scrutiny. They won't be focusing on doing their job. So that suggests there is some kind of behavioral difference. And then we hear that the public has not exhibited any difference in levels of confidence, and yet in this moment, it certainly seems like anything that can be done to rehabilitate the confidence of the public would be received as such. So I guess the first question I have for you is, how do we square those circles between the empirical results and the reasoning? Why did they not make a difference? What reasoning does the study give? And does that reasoning apply here? Because there could be other reasons, perhaps the existence of the cameras wasn't well publicized. Perhaps the cameras weren't deployed in an effective manner. There's, it's important, I think, for us to drill down on that and see if it's an inherent issue with cameras or if that situation would apply here. And then the second question I have for you is, needless to say, the studies have been based on historical data and recent events have turned this into a unique and unprecedented moment. So do you think that there might be changes? Do you think the fact that the public requires this potential rehabilitation might create more confidence as a result of body cameras, and would that cause us to examine them again in light of different circumstances?
Yeah, so I'll try and address that. I can't speak to why the research wouldn't bear out what the public opinion with regards to the cameras may be. And that's for people that are much better at empirical evidence than I am. With regards to technology decisions, what we do is we have a governance process. We weigh the pros and cons of each technology. We weigh the outcomes that are expected from that technology. And the driving factor behind body cameras at this point is around the reduction of use of force or public transparency. So when we rely on the evidence that's out there from the researchers or from our own pilot, that is the best evidence that's available today. So when we're looking at a $6 million roughly purchase, give or take, and a $2 million annual cost, that is a substantial amount of investment to put into place, both in regards to the original purchase, the operating time, and then the loss of officer time in itself to deal with that piece of equipment. Certainly since Prime Minister Trudeau's comments around body cameras, the academic community has come out in numerous settings in Toronto as well as in Edmonton here recently, speaking with their evidence-based findings around the use of these technologies at present. We continue to monitor the technology, we continue to monitor the evidence behind it, the pros and cons. Certainly it's understandable that people will look for a magic pill solution to a large problem. The suggestion is at this point, this isn't a magic pill. This is something that can be brought in if the desire is to do that at a high expense. But it certainly hasn't delivered on the promise that it had 5 years ago from a purely evidence-based perspective. As the chief has stated, we were on a path down the in-car camera path already. We're expediting that piece, and we had been bringing frequent updates on the body camera issue to Commission over the last number of years, and very little had changed in those updates with regards to any new findings or change on those matters. But we continue to monitor it, and as we learn new things with regards to technology, we'll be sure to bring those forward. Should there be a source of funding, as the chief has stated, then we would be more than glad to entertain the discussion if we're told to do so.
Thank you. Anything else, Commissioner Singh?
That's all. The only final thing I would note is I wouldn't mind seeing that study if you are able to contact the office.
Yeah, we'll submit it into the Commission.
Thank you. Commissioner Hahn.
I'm good, thanks.
Commissioner Hussainli.
I'm good, thank you.
Commissioner Cartmell.
Nothing more for me. Really good discussion on this one. Thank you.
Commissioner O'Brien. Thank you. And anything else from people here? Nothing. Okay, thank you very, very much for that report and the report throughout the Chief's reports. The next matter on is the chair report, and this is where I've been told that I'm supposed to say that I have been appointed to the president of the Canadian Association of Police Governance. I have. I'm honored to do it, and certainly at this time, with everything going on, it's going to be a rather active appointment and time, so I look forward to that. Yeah, thank you. The Executive Director's Report. Committee reports. First up is Governance Committee.
Sorry. Yeah, I think it was covered under 8.4, the body-worn camera.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. Second is the Finance and Audit Committee. Commissioner Singh.
Sorry, classic, oops, there's that working? All that just to say nothing, no, everything's in the consent agenda.
Okay, you were breaking up there, but I guess we've covered it. Professional Standards Committee. Yes.
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton.
We have our summary of compliments. First one, my 16-year-old son just got his driver's license and a new car. Yesterday, we insured his new car and it got registered in his name. His very first day on the road, he went to a Tim Hortons drive-thru. There was a police car behind him in line. When he got his drink, he parked in the lot. At that time, the police car pulled up behind him. The officer came up to his window and motioned him to roll down the window. My son was wondering, what did I do wrong? The officer said, I ran your plate while I was behind you in the drive-thru, and I see you just got your car today. Congratulations. I wanted your first experience with the police to be a positive one. I thought this was very cool. Let the teen know you see him and be aware, but also put a positive spin on it. At approximately 1 p.m. on Friday, April 24th, 2 officers responded to a 911 call placed by my wife because she was experiencing a severe panic attack with suicidal ideation. I strongly wish to compliment the 2 officers for their patience, compassion, professionalism, judgment, and good humor, which were instrumental in securing my wife's safety and compliance. Officer Whitehead allowed me to travel with her to the hospital and was also kind enough to give me a ride home as I was unable to enter the hospital due to the ongoing pandemic. I'm very grateful for the service they provided in that difficult time. Performance of 2 special policemen, Constable Carolock and Constable Schurner. To whom it may concern, I wish to commend Brian Kardas, 4279, and Michael Schurner, 3117, on their behavior towards me on a recent visit to the Windermere Police Station. I had received a notice from bylaw regarding graffiti on the fence behind my home and was instructed to get a police report. I was shocked to learn that I would be held responsible for damage that I had not inflicted. Upon reaching the police station, Brian Carter questioned me as to why I was there, and after explaining and showing him a picture of the graffiti, he called on Michael Schurner to assist. Michael called bylaw officers and was on the phone for almost 20 to 30 minutes trying to resolve my concerns. They were both very pleasant, and it was a pleasure to deal with them as they went above and beyond what was required, and I was totally impressed with their efforts to help me resolve my concerns. I wanted to express my appreciation of their treatment and feel they represented the department in an excellent manner and felt you should be made aware of this. Next one, Constable Saruga and Constable Ketchison. I'd like to drop you a message with my sincere appreciation for a couple of your officers. Last week, I simply asked a retired EPS member if arrangements could be made to have a police drive-by for my grandson's 8th birthday. My grandson has always loved the police and the job that they do. It was explained that I understood EPS were extremely busy, but all I could do was ask and left it at that. Much to my pleasant surprise, with us standing on the driveway, a police vehicle and 2 uniformed members arrived and led our motorcade past the residence. Once the drive-by was done, Constable Segura and Constable Ketchison stopped and had a quick word with my grandson and gave him a chance to have his first ever look at a police vehicle and speak with police officers. These fine gentlemen even posed for a few pictures with him. This interaction may seem insignificant to some, but for those 2 constables to take 5 minutes from the busy day has left a lasting impression on him and my entire family. They were polite, patient, and understanding. They should be recognized and commended for their very professional approach and demeanor. In light of the current pandemic and the measures surrounding it, I can't thank you and these 2 officers for their kind gesture. While it's sad to see an 8-year-old miss out on a birthday party with all his friends, this alternative has left a positive impression with him and the interaction with these 2 individuals. Compliment Michael Chernick. The officer helped me on Tuesday, May 19, 2020. He is very helpful and provided all the relevant information and brochures needed for my concern. What he wasn't able to answer, he asked for assistance. I noticed him with other clients, and he's very patient and makes sure they understand. He did a really great job. I'd like to compliment his work ethic. And the last one is in regards to Hector Gonzalez and Constable Chad Martin. They were called in to provide praise and thanks to Constable Hector Gonzalez and his partner, whom he believed was Constable Chad Martin, for their response to his recent vehicle break-in. Both officers were very welcoming, friendly, and made him feel like they genuinely cared about the incident. He said they were just fantastic and do an amazing job in his Riverdale neighborhood. He wanted to ensure that their excellent work was recognized and appreciated. He also mentioned that all the officers he's encountered on downtown beats have been great.
Thank you very much for that. There were no exemptions from the consent agenda. So number 13, Edmonton Police Commissioner inquiries. Do we have any inquiries? Any commissioner on the phone have an inquiry? Hearing none. Other business. The Canadian Association of Police Governance update. Well, the major update, of course, is that the conference scheduled for August has been canceled due to COVID-19, and then it was tried to be put over, and that was canceled as well. And so now they are looking at having a conference light, which is nobody is going to sit through 3 days in front of their computers, we don't imagine. And so breaking it up into modules and putting it more out across the year. So more on that as soon as we have it. Next is Alberta Association of Police Governance.
Thank you. We're having our annual general meeting online using a couple of different platforms for votes. That's on the 23rd of June. And we've actually rebooked our conference in Brooks, and it is the 18th and 19th of September.
Thank you very much. REACH update, Commissioner Hahn.
You bet. And REACH has been particularly busy in May. As people know, they are one of the primary partners community partners that work with EPS to take the load off of what EPS is tasked to do, and have done that for the past 10 years. So this last month they did 1,451 contacts, which is well over their normal target of 1,200. And as usual, 211 account for 70% of the contacts. And they did 871 warm handoffs to mostly the shelters, but a lot of people just needed a ride home, rides home to their residence. In general contacts, they do not just 24/7 crisis diversion, but they made general contacts over 700 times, and that's just building relationships with people in the community, providing food, water, personal items, that sort of thing, but building a relationship and understanding that, you don't have to call EPS every time something happens. There are other people here to help you. They did notice, or they have noticed, an increase in drug overdose and mental health calls where community members are in psychosis during the month of May. They, of course, are exposed to health issues like everybody else. Now, the 211 staff have been working remotely and are engaged with daily video calls to support their mental health exercise. Hope Mission and Boyle remain staffed above normal capacity thanks to some additional funding from Homeward Trust. Thank you for that. So this has helped overall staff wellness and enthusiasm in supporting the community. So REACH does continue to provide an essential service, does continue to take the load off EPS, and will continue to be one of those community partners that we talk about taking the load off of what we ask police to do in the name of community safety writ large. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Commissioner comments, concerns, or commendations? Anybody on the phone? Thank you. Now we're coming to the media inquiries, and I don't have a list of media in front of me, although I know I heard some people phone in. I think we're going to get a process for that, but we are going to ask you, because of this unique circumstance, that each person from the media restrict their questions to just one. You might have more than one question, and we will certainly be happy to answer them after the meeting. You can direct your questions either to the Edmonton Police Service or, of course, the Edmonton Police Commission, and we can answer in more detail then. So, starting with Anna from the Edmonton Journal. Please go ahead.
Hi. So, Chief McPhee, you made some comments earlier about dash cams and moving forward with dash cams. So I was hoping you could elaborate on that a little bit and when we might expect that to happen.
Sorry, did I catch the dash cams moving forward and when? Was that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's being looked at right now. Hopefully we're trying to find how quickly we can get there. Obviously, there's some potential vendors that we already have agreements with, so we need to figure out if we can do it and how quickly we do. We're hoping that we can have everything completed in the cars start to finish within 18 months.
Thank you. Who's next?
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Heather? Heather from Global. Sorry, we're just trying to find her line here. Okay. Hang on, Heather from Global. We're good? Okay, go ahead, please.
Kendra from Global, do you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. Chief, I just wanted to ask you, yesterday EPS sent out a warning about the release of somebody that has been charged with kidnapping and sexual assault of a child, Wade Steen or Stein. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but there have been some comments on social media about this fellow, and I know there are some lawyers in the city who are critical of EPS of naming this individual and this warning and the number of public comments that have been put out there as well. What can you say about that?
Yeah, great question, Heather. And, I'd first start off with we're not calling in question the bail process. We look at this from the perspective that we have an obligation to public safety in relation to should people be notified. The decision was made by the Justice of the Peace, and we're not questioning that. What we're saying is we opposed it, as did the Crown, opposed release. The individual that we're discussing, it was a sexual assault on a stranger, and the individual was put back into the area very close to the victim. This is before the courts. That's why our decision was made, but it's not to contravene in the process. Would be the same thing if somebody got out through the judicial system on parole. We may basically do a notification, but that was the reason and decision that we made.
Thank you. CBC? Is it on the line? Go ahead, please.
Hello? Yeah. Oh, can you hear me?
We can, yes. You can go ahead.
Thank you. Chief McPhee, my question for you, and we've touched on this before, is should officers accused of racial profiling and excessive force be pulled off patrol pending a hearing? And if not, how much of that has to do with the current role of the union, and should this be reconsidered?
Each case of officer discipline is looked on its individual merit and the circumstances around it. Obviously racial profiling is something that we take very serious. In relation to the EPA, are they a barrier to that? Absolutely not. We have come at this from different roles. I think we both respect our roles. And the reality is sometimes we're going to differ. From that going to another level, to put some transparency in that, we've stated publicly, both us and the EPA, that, if there's independent oversight available now that the Police Act is opening, we're certainly welcome to that, and, the public complaints process as well. So we're not always going to agree, but the respect is there.
Thank you very much, and I understand that is the last journalist. Okay. So there's nothing on the agenda now. We're done. Can I have a motion for adjournment? Thank you, Commissioner Hamilton. We're adjourned. Yeah, and dial back in. That's right. Those housekeeping things. Where does one cover
Thanks for using WebEx. Visit our website at www.webex.com.
was the mask thing? They should have it on their iPad.